On December 22, 1944, at 14:47 hours, 6 kilometers south of Bastogne, General Major Heinz Kokat stood upright in the open turret of his command half-track, snow stinging his face as he lifted his binoculars. Through the drifting white curtain, he saw a sight that contradicted every principle of armored warfare he had studied over 2 decades of military service. He watched, stunned, as American Sherman tanks, dozens upon dozens of them, advanced in a column formation from the south. For a long second, he lowered the binoculars, rubbing the lenses as if they had betrayed him, then unfolded his map. According to all German intelligence, the nearest American armored force, Patton's celebrated 4th Armored Division, had been a full 100 miles to the south merely 48 hours earlier. German logistical calculations insisted that moving an armored division that distance under winter conditions required between 7 and 10 days. Yet the Americans had done it in 2. With a tightening in his chest, Kokat radioed his corps commander. "American armor approaching from the south. Estimate 50 tanks. Their movement rate exceeds our planning assumptions." The reply was immediate and dismissive. "Impossible! Patton's forces remain near Luxembourg assembling for counteraction. You are observing local reserves." But Kokat knew precisely what he was seeing, and he knew the implications. The siege of Bastogne, the operation intended to sever the American lines and seize the crucial road junction before reinforcements could intervene, was on the verge of collapse. Not from poor tactics nor lack of will, but because American logistics had achieved something German doctrine considered physically unachievable. To understand the depth of the German miscalculation, one had to return to December 16, 1944, 4 days earlier. At German Army Group B headquarters, General Feldmarschall Walter Model examined a detailed map of the Ardennes, his finger pressing against a single small town, Bastogne. 7 roads converged there, the only hard surface routes capable of supporting armored divisions through the winter-bound Ardennes forests. Model's plan depended entirely on speed. Break through the overstretched American front, seize Bastogne within 48 hours, and then surge west toward Antwerp, thereby splitting the Allied forces and compelling negotiations before America's industrial output rendered further German resistance futile. The timetable was mercilessly precise. Day 1 to 2, break enemy lines and encircle Bastogne. Day 3 to 5, capture the town and secure the road network. Day 6 to 10, drive toward the Meuse River before American armored reinforcements could reposition. The plan rested on assumptions regarding American response time, 7 to 10 days to shift their armored divisions from the south to the Ardennes. German horse-drawn logistics required at least that much time. Therefore, German planners assumed American forces would be similarly constrained. It was an assumption that would prove disastrous. By December 20th, day 4 of the offensive, Bastogne still stood defiant. The 101st Airborne Division, surrounded and heavily outnumbered, refused to yield. German forces controlled the outskirts, but every assault failed to crack the defenders. Model's meticulously crafted timeline was unraveling. If American armor reached Bastogne before it fell, the entire German strategy would fail. Those 7 roads, the arteries of the Ardennes, would remain in American hands, and the German Panzer spearheads would be trapped in the forest, barely able to maneuver, and helpless once the weather cleared enough for Allied aircraft to return to the skies. General Major Kokat, commanding the 26th Volksgrenadier Division encircling Bastogne, received new orders on December 21st. The voice on the line was sharp, tense. "Capture Bastogne within 24 hours. American reinforcements are approaching from the south. You must seize the town before they arrive." Kokat recalculated the distance. Patton's 4th Armored Division lay 100 miles south. Even assuming American mobility was superior to German, severe winter conditions meant at least 7 days before they could arrive in force. He believed he still had time. He was wrong. On December 20th, at 11:30 hours, 8 kilometers south of Bastogne, a German forward observation post monitored the southern approaches with growing unease. Oberleutnant Klaus Weber crouched in a snow-laden foxhole, his binoculars trained on the winding road. His orders were simple: report any American troop movement from the south. At 11:47 hours, Weber stiffened. Through the falling snow, he saw a column of Sherman tanks, 12 of them, advancing north at roughly 15 kilometers per hour. He immediately radioed headquarters. "American armor advancing. Estimate 1 company. Preparing engagement." His position held 6 75mm anti-tank guns, arranged according to standard German defensive doctrine. Allow the lead enemy vehicles to pass, then destroy the center of the column to trap the remainder. A proven tactic. At 12:03 hours, Weber's guns fired in a coordinated volley. 2 Shermans erupted in flame, smoke billowing into the cold air. The column halted. American infantry leaped from their vehicles, spreading out for a counterattack. Weber expected them to follow established procedure: pause, request artillery, regroup, wait for reinforcements. That alone could consume the remainder of the daylight. But at 12:11 hours, barely 8 minutes after the ambush began, Weber heard an unexpected rumble. Through his binoculars, he saw that the remaining American tanks were moving again. Not retreating, not fortifying, not even returning fire. They were bypassing his ambush entirely, swinging off the road, plowing through knee-deep snow, determined to continue their advance north. Weber seized his radio. "Sir, the Americans are not stopping. They are bypassing our position. They are abandoning disabled tanks and continuing the advance." His commander responded sharply. "Impossible! No armored force abandons damaged vehicles without recovery. They will return." But Weber knew what he saw. The column crested a northern ridge and vanished into the snowy haze. They were gone. At 12:45 hours, Weber spotted a second American column, 20 Sherman tanks advancing steadily. He did not bother firing. His guns could eliminate 3, perhaps 4 tanks, but the rest would ignore him and press northward. At 13:20 hours came a third column, 18 tanks. At 14:05 hours, a fourth, 24 tanks. By 14:30 hours, Weber's voice trembled with frustration as he radioed headquarters again. "Sir, they refuse to stop. We have counted 74 tanks in 3 hours. Every time we engage, they bypass and continue. We are not delaying them. We are merely observing them as they pass." There was a long, heavy silence. Then, "Understood. Withdraw to secondary positions. Conserve ammunition." Weber realized instantly that headquarters had reached the same grim conclusion he had. The Americans were not attempting to seize territory through attrition. They were racing against time itself, and nothing, not ambushes, not winter terrain, not destroyed vehicles, would slow them. As Weber's squad trudged north through the deepening snow, he glanced back at the road. Another American column approached on the southern horizon. They were endless. On December 21st, at 1400 hours, German intelligence headquarters in the Ardennes sector grew increasingly alarmed. Oberstleutnant Hinrich von Luttwitz, Chief of Staff for the 47th Panzer Corps, studied reconnaissance reports spread across his desk. For 48 hours, his intelligence teams tracked American fuel consumption, and the numbers defied logic. An aide entered with another folder. "Sir, aerial reconnaissance confirms American armor is advancing without establishing fuel depots." Von Luttwitz opened the file, scanning the analysis. German Panzer divisions required fixed fuel depots every 50 kilometers, each demanding 48 hours to establish, and more than 200 tons of fuel delivered by horse-drawn wagons or captured trucks. These depots formed predictable logistical choke points. The Americans, however, maintained no such depots. Their fuel traveled with their armor. Von Luttwitz summoned his logistics officer. "Explain how they sustained such an advance without depots." The officer produced another document. "Sir, we have identified their method. 240 GMC trucks, each carrying 800 gallons of gasoline in portable rubber bladders. They operate on a rotation system. 80 trucks refuel forward units, 80 return south for resupply, and 80 remain in transit. Refueling time per Sherman tank, 8 minutes. Von Lüttwitz quickly calculated the numbers. 240 trucks multiplied by 800 gallons equaled 192,000 gallons delivered daily, enough to propel 400 Sherman tanks roughly 100 kilometers. Meanwhile, the German system delivered 250,000 liters per week. He stared at the figures. They provide in one day what takes us an entire week, and they do so while advancing at full speed. The officer nodded grimly. Yes, sir. If this rate continues, their advance can proceed indefinitely without logistical pause. Von Lüttwitz felt dread coiling inside him. But fuel was only part of the revelation. At 15:30 hours, another report arrived that seemed even more implausible.
The intelligence officer entered with urgency in his stride. Sir, the Americans have crossed the Sûre River at Martelange. Von Lüttwitz checked his watch. Impossible. Our engineers destroyed that bridge at 15:30 hours. He paused, realization dawning. That was 45 minutes ago. The officer laid out aerial photographs. Sir, the Americans have built a new bridge. It is already functional. Von Lüttwitz examined the images. The bridge stretched at least 200 meters, the very length his engineers estimated would require 72 hours to rebuild with available lumber and steel. The engineering officer stepped forward. Sir, the Americans are using prefabricated M2 treadway bridge sections, each 25 feet long. They have 8 pneumatic floats inflated in 12 minutes each. 120 engineers work in rotating shifts under portable floodlights powered by mobile generators. They continued construction after nightfall. The timestamp on the photograph read 20:30 hours. The bridge had been completed in 4 hours and 15 minutes. In his war diary, von Lüttwitz wrote solemnly, "The Americans are not constrained by the physical limitations that bind us. Their engineering capacity functions at industrial scale. Destroyed infrastructure no longer delays their advance." The revelations did not stop there. By 1600 hours on December 21st, another urgent report arrived on von Lüttwitz's desk. His intelligence officer placed it before him with a troubled expression. Sir, American tactical air support remains operational despite weather conditions. Von Lüttwitz's eyes widened. Impossible! Cloud ceiling is 200 meters, visibility under 2 kilometers. No air force can function in such conditions. The officer presented photographs of newly constructed American airstrips. Sir, they have built 6 forward airfields in the last week using prefabricated steel matting, each runway assembled in approximately 72 hours. These airstrips lie within 40 kilometers of the front. Von Lüttwitz studied images of P-47 Thunderbolts lined along the steel-matted runways that had not existed mere days earlier. He counted 18 aircraft in one photograph alone. The officer continued, "They use ground-based SCR-584 radar to guide aircraft through cloud cover. Pilots receive targeting coordinates via radio from forward observers. They require visual confirmation only during final descent. Thus, they operate in conditions that would ground any conventional air force." Von Lüttwitz swallowed hard. How many aircraft? 1,200 P-47s assigned to 9th Tactical Air Command. Weather currently limits operations to 400 sorties daily. When skies clear, he hesitated, they can execute 2,000 sorties a day. Each can deliver 2 500-pound bombs and 8 rockets. Von Lüttwitz gazed at the map marking German Panzer concentrations around Bastogne. Once the sky cleared, every tank, truck, fuel depot, and assembly point would be exposed to relentless bombardment. Later he wrote, "American air power is not limited by weather but by infrastructure, and they build infrastructure faster than we can destroy it." Confirmation arrived within hours. American fighter bombers destroyed 18 German tanks and 42 supply trucks in one afternoon, even under clouded skies. By 200 hours on December 22nd, Kokot sat in his command post analyzing the calculations his staff had compiled. Every figure pointed toward a stark truth. American forces were advancing at a velocity far beyond German doctrinal expectations.
His operations officer placed a final sheet before him. Sir, 4th Armored Division advance rate, approximately 2.08 kilometers per hour, sustained over 48 hours. German doctrine assumed maximum winter enemy advance of 0.3 kilometers per hour. Kokot did the math. The Americans were moving 7 times faster than German planning allowed. His logistics officer added another sobering assessment. Sir, matching American speed under current conditions would require 18 times greater fuel capacity, 6 times faster bridge construction, and air superiority we have not held since 1943. Kokot stared at his operations map. American forces were 6 kilometers south of Bastogne. At their current pace, they would reach the 101st Airborne perimeter in roughly 2.9 hours. He lifted the radio handset and contacted von Lüttwitz. American armor will reach Bastogne perimeter by 0500 hours. Request permission to withdraw to defensible positions before we are caught between their relief column and the town's defenders. Von Lüttwitz responded without hesitation. Withdrawal denied. Hold current positions and prevent American breakthrough. Reinforcements are en route. Kokot exhaled slowly. There were no reinforcements. Both men knew it. And in less than 3 hours, when American tanks met the paratroopers of the 101st, the siege would be over. At 4:47 hours, 13 minutes earlier than Kokot had calculated, the first Sherman tanks reached the American defensive lines south of Bastogne. The siege was broken. By 05:15 hours, Kokot stood again in the turret of his command half-track, observing the southern edge of Bastogne through his binoculars. He watched American infantry clasping hands with paratroopers, officers exchanging quick embraces, supply trucks already rolling forward with practiced efficiency. His operations officer climbed beside him. "Sir, your orders." Kokot lowered the binoculars.
Prepare defensive positions. They will consolidate quickly and expand their perimeter. We must form a new line before their air support becomes fully active. But even as he spoke, he understood the futility of the effort. The Americans had just demonstrated an ability to shift an armored division 100 miles in 48 hours, to build bridges in 4 hours, and to launch air support in conditions that grounded the Luftwaffe entirely. What Kokot could not yet foresee was the magnitude of what would follow. Within 24 hours of breaking the siege, American engineers would erect 3 additional bridges across the Sour River. Within 48 hours, Patton's Third Army would mass over 250,000 men and 40,000 vehicles around Bastogne. Within 72 hours, once the skies cleared, 2,000 Allied aircraft would strike continuously across the Ardennes. The German offensive, Hitler's last gamble in the West, was effectively over. Not because of one decisive engagement, but because American logistics had outpaced German assumptions by orders of magnitude. 4 days after Bastogne's relief, on December 26, 1944, von Lüttwitz wrote in his war diary, "The American relief operation violated every principle of winter warfare as we have understood it. They maneuvered an armored division at summer pace in December conditions. They constructed infrastructure faster than we could demolish it. They flew tactical missions in weather we viewed as impossible. This was not a defeat of German courage or tactical acumen. It was the collision of 2 fundamentally different systems of war. Ours is constrained by horses, rail transport, and diminishing fuel. Theirs is driven by factories, mass logistics, and an ability to project power at industrial scale." German officers who survived the Ardennes offensive echoed this sentiment. Kokot later wrote that when he saw the Sherman columns approaching from the south, he felt as though the laws of war had shifted in mid-battle. "We calculated everything: fuel consumption, bridge construction time, weather limitations. The Americans ignored all of it. They did not break the rules, they rewrote them." In his memoirs, von Lüttwitz was even more blunt. "Modern war is not determined by the general with the best tactics or the soldier with the greatest bravery. It is determined by the nation with the most trucks, the most fuel, the most engineers, the nation that can build a bridge in 4 hours instead of 4 days." For the Panzer commanders at Bastogne, the lesson was brutally simple. Courage and skill mattered only within the constraints imposed by logistics. In December 1944, American industry expanded those constraints so far that German calculations ceased to function. Patton's 100-mile dash did more than save a surrounded town. It revealed that the war would no longer be decided solely by generals and infantrymen. It would be won by production lines, supply chains, and the ability to move an army at a speed the enemy believed physically impossible. And in that moment at Bastogne, German commanders finally understood. They were no longer losing to soldiers alone. They were losing to an industrial system capable of reshaping the battlefield itself.